Okie dokie. So today's topic is how to talk about being pro-life with relative confidence. So this semester, right, because of coronavirus, a lot of our conversations and interactions will be online. And I know, like in lots of my classes, we have to like go on the discussion board and have conversations, and maybe that's how you're communicating with people on Facebook, on Twitter, right? So a lot of online dialogues will be online, and online dialogues can be pretty overwhelming. And if you're anything like me, having conversations, especially on controversial topics like abortion, can be pretty nerve-wracking, right? So I see it all the time. People get immediately upset before they're even done reading your first sentence, and they'll call you all kinds of names, right? Add to this the large varieties of experiences one may have that shapes how one approaches the topic of abortion and the various arguments for and against abortion, and suddenly having a discussion seems very overwhelming, right? So where do I start? How do I begin? How do I maintain a level head and not let my emotions or the other person's emotions get the best of me, right? How do I think clearly about the issue? So my aim here is to help you navigate through the issue and help you identify the basic patterns in most abortion discussions, right? And there's really only a handful of things, about 3 or 4, that you really need to know or learn how to recognize. And once you get these 3 or so basic things down, you will be able to navigate, at least in my own estimation, about 80 to 95% of the discussion, right? And with 80 to 95% of the discussion handled, this should give you the confidence to persuade other people, with grace, at least, the pro-life position. All right, and if you guys have any questions whatsoever, feel free to interrupt, and I will answer. And then we will have Q&A at the end as well. Okay, so let's get started. Do you guys see that the slide on my screen has changed?
Yeah, we can see it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so suppose one day you're doing homework and you have a little brother and sister, and they come up to you and say, "Hey, big bro or big sis, can I kill this?" Now, without looking back, what should one of our first questions be, right? So before you say yes, you should kill this, or before you say no, you shouldn't kill this, you should be asking, what is it? So if she has like an earthworm on a fishing hook, we might say, okay, cool, yeah, go ahead. However, if she has a knife at the throat of like a puppy, or a knife at the throat of the next door neighbor's kid, we would probably do a little freak out and say, no, you definitely cannot kill this, right? So the answer to the question, can I kill this, depends largely on a preliminary question on what this is. Does that make sense, guys? So far, so good? Yes. Okay, I don't hear anything, so I'm just going to assume yes. So the first thing we as pro-lifers should get down is that the debate revolves around one issue. What is the unborn? If the unborn is not an innocent human being, then sure, by all means, go ahead and kill it. It'd be no different than getting like a tooth pulled or something like that. However, if the unborn is an innocent human being, then killing an innocent human being is morally wrong. And that's the crux of our argument. The issue isn't rape, although that is important. And the issue isn't abusive foster homes, although that is also important. The issue isn't whether we as pro-lifers vote for this or any other kind of issues like welfare or the death penalty. The central issue, the central question we have to answer is, what is the unborn, right? So I have a bunch of, distractions here. So these are kind of like slogans that are not directly related to what is the unborn. So don't let those things distract you, right? So that's the first thing we should really get down, really memorize, is that this is the question that we have to answer. What is the unborn? Okay, so that's number one. So the second thing that we as pro-lifers should get down is a simple formulation of what it is that we believe, right? So it's 2 premises and a conclusion. Premise number 1, it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. That's pretty straightforward. I don't know a lot of people who can plausibly deny that, right? Premise number 2, abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. And so it follows with ironclad logical necessity that abortion is therefore wrong. So this is our position, right? So it's very short, very easy to memorize. If you can memorize the first 2 premises, the conclusion should just naturally follow. And the basic structure is something like this, right? So X is wrong, X is Y, so Y is also wrong. Pretty simple, right? So now think back to the issue that we just looked over, right? or the several different issues, right? So in order for pro-choicers to deny the conclusion that abortion is wrong, they have to deny either the first premise or the second premise. So which one are they usually denying? It doesn't sound like they're denying the first premise, right? It sounds like they're denying the second premise, that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. All right, so let's look at some examples. All right, I need an abortion because I can't afford a child. Okay, so this denies the second premise. And remember, the second premise is abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. But how? How does it deny the second premise? Well, because they assume that abortion is not killing a human child, but something else. We don't want to say that the pro-choicer thinks they have a full-fledged member of the moral community dying when they have an abortion. That would be kind of uncharitable on our part, right? So the best way to understand the pro-choicer in this case is that they think what they are aborting just isn't a human child, right? So take note that this objection, this reason, doesn't really argue for the status of the unborn, but just assumes the unborn aren't really human. Do you guys see that?
Yeah, I see it.
I see it.
Okay, so next one. Women will only get unsafe abortions. Okay, how does this deny the second premise? Well, remember the second premise states that abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Well, this denies the second premise by assuming the unborn isn't human. If the unborn was an innocent human being, then of course no abortions are safe, since every abortion causes the death of an innocent human being. So that's how this slogan denies the second premise. But note that they aren't really arguing for the status of the unborn not being human. It only really assumes it. Okay, last one. It is unfair to bring an unwanted child into the world. So we know it's going to deny the second premise, but how? Okay, so can we start to see like the pattern here, right? Abortion is okay because we shouldn't bring an unwanted child in the world. You'll see that it assumes that what is being aborted isn't already a child that already exists in the world. It isn't really arguing that it isn't an innocent human child. It's just assuming it isn't an innocent human child. Do we see that? So do we see the pattern here, guys?
Yep.
I
see it.
Okay, cool. So in most cases, though not all, but in most cases, pro-choice arguments will be doing this, right? So they will just be assuming that the unborn isn't an innocent human being. But of course, if you're going to be denying the pro-life position, if you're going to say that what you are killing isn't a valuable human being, then you better make pretty sure that you can justify this, right? But these justifications for abortion don't actually do that. They just kind of assert it. So they do what's called like begging the question, right? In philosophers' terms, I'm a philosophy major, so that is, they assume the very thing that they need to justify, right? And most pro-choice arguments at the lower level, at least the lower popular level, they'll be doing this. But sometimes that's kind of hard to catch, right? So how are we able to recognize whether a pro-choice argument actually does beg the question? So here's a second thing, or the third. Here's another thing that you should really get down, right? It's a tactic called trot out the toddler. The idea is this, right? So we as pro-lifers believe that the unborn is just as human and just as innocent as a 2-year-old toddler. So if the pro-choice argument wouldn't work for killing a 2-year-old toddler, then it wouldn't work for killing the unborn in the womb, right? So let's see what this looks like in practice, right? So the first one, suppose the pro-choicer says, I think abortion is okay when you can't afford to have a child, right? Now, it may be tempting to discuss economic factors. What is it that we as pro-lifers do to help ensure women are able to raise their children and financial security and all that? And as important as those things are, that isn't the core issue here, right? The core issue here is, what is the unborn? So try out the toddler. Reply with something like, well, suppose I have a 2-year-old in front of me, right? Is it okay for me to kill that 2-year-old because I cannot afford it, right? And if the pro-choicer is honest, they'll be like, no, of course not. It's not okay to kill a 2-year-old, right? And then we respond with something like, well, that's the issue, right? What is the unborn, right? So they'll say there's a difference between the unborn and a 2-year-old. Okay, that's exactly what we're talking about. It's, is there a difference at all? Not can they afford it or can they not? It's what is the unborn? What is the status of the unborn? So we move away from the economic factors there and we get back to the central issue is, what is the unborn? And trotting out the toddler can help you do that. Okay, so what about this one? I'm personally against abortion, but think it should be available for women or something like that, right? So let's try out the toddler again. All right, so we say something like, well, imagine I have a 2-year-old in front of me. Would it be okay for that 2-year-old to be killed so long as we were personally against it. Right, and then the pro-choicer should say something like, "Well, no, of course not. It's an innocent child," and then we say something like, "Ah, well, that's what we say about the unborn." So let's talk about that instead. What is the unborn? Right. So you guys see how substituting the unborn with a 2-year-old will help you refocus on the central issue. Let's talk about rape here. So what about rape? Incest. Okay. So, well, first off, do you guys see the pattern? Because I want to throw some of these out to you.
Yeah. So if you're saying like if someone were to be raped or conceive a
Right.
child from
Right.
incest, well, what if a 2-year-old was conceived from rape? Should we kill that 2-year-old? Is kind
That's
of
right. That's right. Yeah. And if I were a pro-choicer, I'd say, no, you should not kill a 2-year-old because it's a product of rape or because its father was a rapist. So then how would you respond?
Oh, then what about the unborn? Just because the child is unborn, does that mean that we should kill that too? If we shouldn't kill a 2-year-old, why should we kill the unborn child that is a product of rape or incest?
That's right. And then if I were a pro-choicer, I might say, well, there's a difference between the two. And
Right.
then you say,
Well, then okay, so that's going to get into a different topic of what is the unborn.
right, a different topic and the more important topic.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Does anyone else want? I'm not able to see like your faces, your beautiful faces. So does anyone else want to volunteer using this? I'll role play the pro-choice person.
Sorry. Yeah.
Do
You want to do the? Yeah, you want to do the rape one?
We just did the rape one.
Oh,
I just
sorry.
did the rape one.
Yeah, just do anyone you want.
Okay, so let's say, well, the foster care system is already so overwhelmed. So I don't think we should use, we should continue to overcrowd something that's just needs reform. And don't you believe it needs reform?
Yeah, I would acknowledge that there's definitely some changes we need to make to the foster care system. And then I would ask them to imagine if we already had a born child, let's say a toddler, who is going to go into the foster care system. Should we be allowed to kill that born child to spare them of the suffering in the foster care system?
No, Matthew, because there's a difference between an unborn child and a 2-year-old. That's ridiculous. And then you say,
But both of them are human beings and they have equal value.
right, and that's what we should be talking about, is whether the unborn does have human value, not about the foster care system. And the foster care system is important, but that's not the issue we're talking about. It's not what's going to settle the difference between us, right? So do you guys see that? Do you guys see how trotting out the toddler or replacing the unborn with a 2-year-old toddler can help you refocus?
Yeah.
Okay, so now that we've pinpointed the exact issue, the only issue that we should be focused on is what is the unborn, right? Yeah. So now that we've found the issue, we have to actually make the case. Okay, so what is it? What is the unborn? Right. So now we actually have to do a little bit of work. All right. So the first thing that we need to know about the unborn is that it is alive. Now, in my own conversations, I've actually heard pro-choicers actually deny this, which is just a little perplexing, right? But that what abortion does is, it kills a living thing shouldn't be controversial. And for those who know, it isn't actually controversial. So 2 semesters ago, I took a medical ethics class here at Cal State. And one of the topics that we focused on was abortion, naturally. And, my professor, I think, was pro-choice because I had seen I stand with Planned Parenthood sticker in her office, but she was very fair. She was very fair. But anyway, the textbook that she assigned us wasn't very fair, right? So it was titled Thinking Critically About Abortion, Why Most Abortions Aren't Wrong and Why All Abortions Should Be Legal. So, it's very obviously going to argue for the pro-choice position. But that's not the point. The point is here's what they say about when life begins, right? So they say, this is often considered a deep question, but it's not. Above, we defined abortion as a type of killing, and of course, you can only kill living things. So yes, fetuses are alive, biologically alive, from conception. They are engaged in the types of life processes reviewed on page 1 of any biology textbook, right? So Nathan Novus and Christina Graub wrote that text. So here are pro-choicers, smart pro-choicers, I might add, who do recognize, like, yeah, like it is alive. Like abortion is a killing of a live thing. So that's the first thing. So, everyone should be agreeing with this. And you know, Nathan Novus, I've actually had private conversations with that guy. He's actually pretty cool. Him and I, we planned to like write an essay together, but that just fell through because I got busy. But yeah, he's a cool guy. But the point is, he's pro-choice, and even he agrees, yeah, it's alive. Okay. So they say it's on the first page of any biology textbook. Is that true? Is that true? Well, yes, it is. So here is a embryology textbook. Now, really quick, someone had mentioned or pointed this out to me earlier that the photo isn't exactly the same as what's. So the photo I have here is the 10th edition, but this quote doesn't come from the 10th edition. It's an earlier edition, I believe. When I was making the slides, I just entered in the title, and I copy pasted the first image I got. So just to kind of be like fair and open, this has 10th edition, but this is not from the 10th edition. No, full disclosure, right? So what is the inborn exactly? Okay, so it's human. An embryology textbook says a zygote is the beginning of a new human being. Human development begins at fertilization, the process during which a male gamete or sperm unites with a female gamete or oocyte to form a single cell called a zygote. This highly specialized, totipotent cell marks the beginning of each of us as a unique individual. Wrong way. Hold on. Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, so here's another textbook. The development of human begins with fertilization, a process by which the spermatozoon from the male and the oocyte from the female unite to give rise to a new organism, the zygote. Right, so that's two embryology textbooks that are saying, yeah, your process begins basically at fertilization, and that is a human being there, right? Okay, and there is scientific consensus of when life begins. So this isn't just like two out of the ordinary textbooks. This is like the scientific consensus, right? So the University of Chicago published a study not too long ago, and they asked a bunch of biologists when life begins, and this is what they found, right? So a sample of 5,502 biologists from 1,058 academic institutions assessed statements representing the biological, there we go, view of a human's life begins at fertilization. 95% of all biologists affirmed the biological view that a human life begins at fertilization, right? So that's, 95% of scientists are saying, yeah, your human life begins at fertilization. That's pretty that's pretty widespread, Okay, so quick recap. There's only one issue. What is the unborn? The argument is simple. It is wrong to kill innocent human beings, and abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being, so abortion is wrong. And if you're unsure whether a pro-choice argument commits the fallacy of begging the question, whether it assumes the very thing they're trying to prove, try out the toddler, right? And in short, the unborn is a live, right? It's a live human being, and scientists know this. There's large consensus on the issues, and even pro-choicers know this, right? And any questions before we move on? No. Okay.
Maybe,
All right. Well,
maybe like a comment.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's, you want like, so on the textbooks that you mentioned, I think the Langman's one is from the 7th edition, I believe.
Okay. Right. So was it with you? I was having that email with.
I think it was. Yeah, I think
Okay.
I think you were the one that sent me the email on
Yeah.
that, because I brought up this this point, but I actually was able to download the 12th edition, which is a closer edition. I think this is like a 2012 version. And even then, there's like a bunch of pictures in there saying that it's a, I don't know, a human blast, a human embryo, a human fetus.
Right. Okay.
So there still is statements. It's just not as, there's not a sentence in there as, that says it as nicely, I guess maybe, or as clearly as this quote right here from Langman's Embryology in the 7th edition. But it's still in there, even in the 12th edition, from what I've seen.
Okay. Cool.
The more the later versions of it, or the more modern versions of it that come from like 2015 and 2016, stuff like that. So.
Right. Well, let's see. 20. I mean, the 12th edition compared to the 4th. I mean, that wasn't like decades ago, right? So it's not super
No,
old.
yeah, it was. I think it was in like 2012 is when I pulled the quotes. But I know
Right.
I've gotten comments from pro-choicers. Your sources are not up to date, and so it's challenging me to like go into more to earlier sources, or I mean, sorry, not earlier sources, but to later sources,
Right. More recent stuff.
more recent stuff to
Yeah.
to pull from. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just looking at this one, I mean, this was done in 2018.
Right.
So I don't think anything has really changed since then, right? I think this is something that you and I talked about in the emails. Is that yeah, like even if it comes from like a 2012 edition, nothing's really changed, and it'd be kind of weird to like keep repeating things that are commonly known, right? So of course you're not gonna have up to date things where so like for example, everyone kind of assumes like gravity is a thing, so you're not going to have papers released last year that gravity is a thing, kind of weird. So yeah, I don't expect that, but you do have like these sort of like meta studies that kind of like, okay, so what's the general consensus, and that's why I really like this one, because it's like, yeah, this is the consensus, so nothing's really changed. But I mean, if I'm doing this like 10 years from now, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna have to like replace this slide with another study or something. So, but I don't expect a lot of things. I don't like, unless someone has this like Nobel Prize winning discovery, I don't think much is gonna change. I wouldn't be too threatened by that. All right.
We got a question in
Yeah,
the
Adrian.
group chat.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Yeah, Adrian, are you going to cover the topic of personhood later on? Because Daniela asked a question about personhood in the chat. But
Yeah.
should we just
So
wait?
personhood, yeah, right here. I'm getting to that. Yeah, I'm not done. I'm kind of pausing just to see if there's anything. So okay, cool. All right, so let's get there, right? So let's get there. Okay, so there's a large consensus on the issue, right? And even pro-choicers know. So what is it? So the pro-choicers really only have pro-choicers only really have one option left, which is to say that it's really innocent, or that it's not actually valuable, right? So they'll say that the unborn is alive and it is human, but it isn't a valuable human being, right? So sometimes you will hear pro-choicers say that the unborn is a human being, but it isn't a person. Human beings aren't valuable, only persons are valuable, right? And this is where like I was talking with Ian earlier before we started, this is where like comparisons with like the Holocaust and slavery come in, right? And it's open to like to debate among pro-lifers whether this is a good idea or not. I won't be getting into that here, but that's where like that idea comes from, right? So there are two ways to view human beings and why they are valuable, right? There is the functionalist view, which states that a human being is only valuable because they perform some kind of function, like thinking, right? And this is where the personhood view comes in, all right? And then there is the essentialist view, which states that human beings are not valuable, or I'm sorry, human beings are valuable not because of some function they perform, but they are valuable in virtue of the kind of thing that they are, namely human, right? So this is why we ought to treat people humanely, or when we say this or that is not a human right, right? So, I mean, have you ever heard of someone getting like their person rights violated? No, it's usually like human rights, right? So, or you have to treat someone humanely, not personally, but humanely. Okay, so now which view do pro-lifers take, right? And which view do pro-choicers take? Well, I think it's obvious that like pro-lifers take the essentialist view, right? We believe that human dignity starts at conception because that's when the human being comes into existence. And so it is an essential part of being a human being. So we pro-lifers take the essentialist view. Now, if you're a pro-choicer and you want to say that there's a difference between a human and a person, well, then what makes you a person will be dependent on something that you do or some kind of function that you perform. So the pro-choicer will take the functionalist view and the pro-lifer will take the essentialist view. Now, unfortunately for them, there are several problems with the functionalist view, right? First, it assumes body self-dualism, right, which leads to certain kinds of absurdities. So for those of you who might not taken a philosophy class, I mean, like I said earlier, I'm a philosophy major, so this is kind of like easier for me to get, but if you don't know what this is, and this is sometimes called like mind-body dualism or soul-body dualism, right? And dualism means like there's a two-ness to you, there's two parts to you, right? So it's this idea that you have two parts, right? So you have the body, which we all know and are familiar with. It has blood and guts and all that junk. And then you have this other part of you that is in control of your body, right? Basically, you are not your body, you are your thoughts. But what's wrong with this view? Well, there's quite a bit. Well, it denies true things, right? So like if I were to punch your arm, it would have to be false that I am punching you, right? I am hitting the body, but I am not hitting you. And so I am not hurting you, I am hurting your body. But this seems kind of absurd, right? It would also be true that you have never been hugged, that you have never been kissed, and that you have never actually been seen. Like if you are your thoughts, I have not seen your thoughts, and so I have not seen you, right? So, but we do think that we can hug this person or hug that person or see this or that person, right? So if the pro-choicer wants to say that you are a person and persons are the same things as like thinking things, then you have like these really strange and obviously false claims that they need to own up to. I had a tab up that was kind of blocking my view. It went away.
No, it wasn't blocking anything.
Okay, cool. It was just on my screen then. All right. Okay, so does that make sense? Does anyone have questions about like the how the functionalist view or the person view assumes a dualism, and these kind of dualisms are weird, or they have weird consequences? Do we see that? Does anyone have any questions about that? Because I know that's like that can get like really philosophical, and I don't want this to like go over anyone's heads.
Yeah, I understand.
Okay, cool. Okay, second problem is that they lack justification, right? So if the pro-choicer wants to say that we come into existence when we start thinking, we can simply ask, okay, why? Why do you believe that? And why think that when we have like some potential counterexamples, right? So here's one counterexample. If I am a person only when I am thinking, then what happens when I stop thinking, right? So like if I'm in a fight, if I'm in a bar fight and I get knocked out, I'm not thinking anymore. Or what happens when I'm asleep, right? So I'm not always thinking. Or what happens like if I'm put under for surgery, right? So these are, I'm not saying that there's no answers to these, but that these are issues that they're going to have to like iron out. And it's not going to be as quick as like, oh, well, there's a difference between a person and a human being. These are things that they need to answer and that they're going to have to answer for. Does that make sense, guys? There's potential counterexamples, and we can just ask, well, why do you believe that, right? Okay, cool. So the third problem with a functionalist view is that it actually justifies infanticide, right? In his book, Practical Ethics, right, the philosopher Peter Singer says that if value is determined by self-awareness, which is part of this personalist view, and self-awareness is like a kind of function, then it isn't just the unborn who are not valuable, but newborns as well, right? So under his view, infanticide, that is, the killing of newborn babies, is also okay. And Peter Singer, he admits this. And as radical as the view is, it does highlight this important fact that you cannot say consciousness of this or that kind determines your worth, but then magically and arbitrarily say that it happens when we are born, right? So you can't just say, well, personhood is when you do this, but then after you're born, you just automatically have it. Like, no, you have to be consistent. Like, birth cannot just be this arbitrary line. Does that make sense? Okay, so now I see what's happening. Okay, so my tab shows up when someone writes a comment. I'm not able to see the comment because then I would have to get rid of my slides. So maybe if Matthew, if you could let me know if there's a comment that I should respond to.
I was actually just answering some of the comments too.
Okay, cool. I'm not able to see it. Sorry guys.
No worries.
Okay, so last one. The fourth problem with the functionalist view.
Sign out. Tap your profile image. For details, tap more info.
No, stop. Be quiet, phone. Sorry, guys. Okay, so the fourth problem, it says that humans are not equal, right? So worth comes in degrees, right? So if your value is grounded in the performance of your function, and the performance of that function comes in degrees, and it seems to follow that your value comes in degrees as well. Right. So perhaps those with Down syndrome aren't as valuable as someone like Albert Einstein, right? Because they don't function the same way. Or perhaps someone becomes less valuable when they get into a car accident and get brain damage. I have a friend who got into a car accident and he had brain damage. He's a classmate of mine, but he's not less valuable because he functions differently, right? Or he functions less. And in fact, like Peter Singer, who was given a philosophy chair, I forget where exactly, I think it was like Yale or Princeton or something, but a lot of disabled people protested the endowment of that chair for him for this very reason, right? Because we see where a view like this goes. It leads to like euthanizing elderly people who don't function as well. So maybe, grandma has Alzheimer's and she isn't as self-aware. So put her down. So it isn't just about the unborn. I mean, it has consequences, not just at the beginning of life, but at the end of life as well. But as pro-lifers, we believe that no, like from beginning to end, like your life has value in virtue of the type of thing you are. So these are problems with the functionalist view. Anyone have questions about the functionalist view that I should answer? And if you're in the chat, have someone just read it out to me.
Not really. There's no questions on it.
Okay, cool. Okay, so the functionalist view of human value is false, right? But then that means that the only other alternative left is the essentialist view, right? So if I'm essentially valuable now and I'm essentially the same thing at conception, then at conception I also had value. So how may one deny this? Well, usually they will deny your value based on one of these 4 ways. And if you can memorize this being the last major thing you need to memorize, then you can get through the vast majority of abortion conversations, right? So they will say that you are not valuable because of your size. It's just a clump of cells or something, right? But since when does your size determine your worth, right? They will say that your level of development determines your worth. But since when is that true, right? We don't say adults are more valuable than infants, even though adults are more developed than infants, right? They will say that the environment you are in determines your worth, right? So being inside your mother's womb. But since when does location determine your worth? Why does moving a few inches down the birth canal magically gives you moral worth, right? And degree of dependency. They will say, since you are not viable, right? So viability is a big conversation, or because you need food from your mother, that you aren't valuable. But again, why is your moral worth dependent on whether or not you are dependent on someone else, right? Even newborns aren't totally independent, right? It's not like you're going to find newborn babies like out in the factory floor or something, earning a wage. But we don't think, unless you're a Peter Singer, that you can kill newborns, right? Or like say that you're dependent like on a pacemaker, right? But the pacemaker doesn't take away your value. Do we know what a pacemaker is? Is that sort of an old example? It's like a machine that like works, like it replaces your heart, and you're like totally dependent on it.
Yeah, or iron, like
yeah,
that.
Yeah.
All the ones.
Yeah, all the machines. Right. So dependency does not determine your moral worth, okay? And so you can memorize us in this really easy thing called SLED, so SLED, size, level of development, environment, degree of dependency. You'll see pro-choicers will say, well, the difference is your size, your level of development, environment, or degree of dependency. But we all know that those aren't value endowing traits. So if you hear a pro-choice argument and you're not exactly sure how it's making its case or like how to think about it, so just try to fit it into one of these, and it'll probably fit into one of these 4 categories. So SLED. So those are like the 3 or 4 basic things you need to memorize. Is you have to understand the big question is, what is the unborn? To make sure that you stay focused on that question, what is the unborn? You have to trot the toddler sometimes. You have to memorize our argument, right? So it's 2 premises and a conclusion. It is wrong. Hold on. I want to make sure I get this exactly right. It is wrong. Yeah. Okay. So it is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is wrong. And SLED. All right. So that's going to be one of the ways that they're going to say that's the difference between like a 2-year-old and an unborn. So if you can get that done, you'll be good for like 80 to 90% of abortion conversations. Now, that's not all there is to it. There are more sophisticated ones, but because we're all college students, I don't think we're going to be coming up against like a David Boonin or a Peter Singer or something like that. So let me, are there any questions for me? This is me, by the way. This is my face.
Yeah, we were just in the comments, there was a question that came up that pro-choicers have sometimes called the human baby inside of the womb a parasite, for example. Like, oh, it's just a parasite that you should just get rid of. I don't know if you check the chat. There have been some people that have responded to it. But
Okay,
do you have any other intake on that point?
Right. So it's an argument from analogy. So if you can point out important differences, the analogy becomes weak. So one important difference is that parasites are always another species. The unborn is not a different species, right? It's not a dolphin. It's not a worm of some sort. It's the same thing that you are. And we looked at the textbooks and we looked at the scientific consensus. No, it's a human being. So that's one important difference. And if it's a human being, then it has value, right? Parasites, as non-rational creatures, they don't really have value. So that's one important difference. Another important difference is that parasites kind of come from without. Right, they're sort of an invasive species. They like latch onto you. I don't know too much about like the different kinds of parasites that are out there, but they kind of like latch onto you from without. But that's not what the unborn are, right? There is a place in your body called the womb that is for the unborn. When a parasite attaches to you, there isn't really a place naturally for your body to do that. And so if there's a place in the body for it, it has a prima facie right, or it has, on the face of it, a right to that part. And that's not what parasites are. So those are two important differences, I would say, to the parasite thing.
Thank you. This is me. I'm videoing myself. It was a really good talk. I learned a lot from it. Would you be able to make this PowerPoint available to us?
Yeah.
Okay.
And so if I do that, I should probably change the images on the textbooks just to make it a little bit more accurate. Yeah. So give me a couple of hours just to kind of change that, because this is just like for my own use.
Yeah.
But if it's going to be out there for the public, let me just make sure that those images are accurate, and then I'll make it available to you.
Also, I sent Matthew something. Tomorrow, Focus on the Family is having their worldwide digital premiere of Sea Life 2020. Have you heard of that at all?
I've heard of Focus on the Family, but I haven't heard of that.
They're having it's their huge, it says, join us and hundreds of thousands of pro-life champions for the worldwide digital premiere of Sea Life 2020. And they're going to have some speakers and a lot of famous people in the industry. It's all about pro-life. So I had Matthew posted on our group chat through Facebook. So if anybody's interested, you just watch it at home. It's at 5 o'clock tomorrow night Pacific time. But thank you very much. I really learned a lot from you, and you have a great voice, by the way. You have an announcer's voice. Have you ever been told that before?
I have been told that. Yeah. I've thought about like being on. I thought about like audiobooks, doing audiobooks, but yeah, I have heard.
You would be great at that. You really would. You have a very good intonation and flow with your voice. So.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate it.
And yes, by the way, I'm your faculty advisor. If you don't know that. So yes, this is how teachers feel when the crickets.
For sure. Okay. It's really awkward. Yeah. I feel you now. Okay. Now I'm like more motivated to like speak up during class. Okay. Ian, do you have any questions?
I guess maybe for the people listening, should we bring up like how? I mean, we've already kind of looked a little bit on how we would respond in the case of rape or incest, but do you have any like stats on that maybe you'd like to bring up or anything like that?
Ooh, no, I'm not very good with that because that's just not my training. I should though. I don't. Off the top of my head, from what I understand, rape is like 1% or less of all abortion cases.
1%.
Yeah. So so one tactic you can kind of play is this, right? So if someone like brings that up to you, say something like, okay, look, rape is terrible, right? Rapists should be put in jail, and you know, all maybe even make a case for capital punishment. Who knows? Say like, okay, if you are willing, like if someone put a bill in front of you that said, okay, we're going to outlaw all abortions except in the case of rape, right? Are you willing to like outlaw 99% of abortions? I think they're gonna say no. I would not sign that bill, right? And so that what that shows is that it isn't really about rape for them. They're just kind of using that as an emotional tug, and it's a great emotional tug. But that isn't really going to be a justification for what they want, right? It's not a justification for you know, abortion on demand or whatever it is that they might seek. So just like, okay, like if that's not going to justify what you want, let's talk about what you want here, and let's talk about the real justifications for that. Otherwise, you know, abortion is just rape is just sort of a distraction. It isn't getting to the point. It isn't getting to the heart of the issue. Now, there's a place and time to discuss, you know, rape, but it wouldn't be in that case. But I would say, and also be careful. In my own conversations, in my own experience, especially if you are talking to a woman, try to read their body language, because it might be that they've had an encounter like that, and so at that point, you might want to put a pause on like the philosophical discussion, and just like, hey, like, I'm sorry that happened to you. You know, I'm sorry. You ask, like, was the man put away? Did they find him? Did he find justice? Or like, you know, and like talk to that person too. So maybe put that on hold if you feel like that's coming from experience from them, because you remember, as pro-lifers, like, we care about the lives of the unborn, but we also care about the lives of the mothers, and we have to attend to them as well. So if that ever comes up, I know it's kind of hard to like see online, but if you're having like a face-to-face discussion, read the body language and see if that's coming somewhere personal for them as well.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, because I've had I won't get into too much detail, but I've had two maybe three women who have brought that up, and it was kind of obvious that it was personal for them. So and they really appreciated me kind of like stopping and changing gears for a little bit. So just be aware of that.
Yeah. I posted in the chat. I don't know if you guys want to take a look at that, but it was a study that was done in 2005. I don't know if you've heard of the Guttmacher Institute.
Yeah.
They're pretty much, they're a really pro-choice organization, and in 2005 they had a study that was done, and even then, out of the applicants that they surveyed, which was a couple thousand women, they concluded that about 1% that they had the abortion due to rape, and even less than that due to incest as well. And so it's a very small percentage. And if somebody says that it's an older source, again, this comes from 2005. Again, they did this survey in 1987. They did it again in 2000, and then they did it again in 2005, and the results pretty much stayed the same. So I don't see any reason why those results would be any different today as well, if you are to get down to the nitty-gritty of the numbers.
Yeah.
I see why those results would be different, and I don't think there's any sources, at least I haven't seen any, that would indicate that the percentage has gone up otherwise.
Right.
yeah, so, Planned Parenthood or any of those organizations that is doing most of the abortions wouldn't put something like that out, most likely. I mean, obviously, if a case like that hurts you, why would they put something like that out? So,
Right.
I mean, until proven otherwise, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't take this as a valid source.
Right. Yeah. What I have a question. I don't know the answer to this, but what constitutes like an outdated source? Like,
Yeah,
is
I don't
it
know.
10 years or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But I know I've gotten that objection before saying that, oh, because this data was taken back in 1979, we can't trust that for today because, things are different today. They're not what they were in the 1980s or in the 1990s or whatever year it was. And so therefore, I have no reason to trust your sources. So, it could be, again, it's probably maybe a slim chance that you might get that. I know I've gotten that during conversations though,
Mhm.
Long Beach, especially because, I mean, actually with college students who, study and everything, they might ask for a source and that's something that you could,
Yeah.
so.
And because I tend to stick to like the more principled arguments that don't really rely on stats anyways, I find the advantage is that dates don't really matter.
Yeah,
So
I would agree too.
yeah, but I would also say that there is definitely force to using numbers. It does have an effect on our psychology. Like, oh, this is a study and it has numbers and
Mhm.
they're very specific and it sounds trustworthy. So I understand. Anything else?
I want to say that I also appreciate what you said about like when someone brings up rate, switching gears and stuff. And I think that there was a podcast I listened to from the last 2 days about a gentleman named Dr. Anthony Levantino, and he's an OBGYN who was an abortionist who then, you're familiar with him, Bryce?
I am familiar with him, yeah. Yeah, he
And
has some great videos.
he talked about the biggest impact. Well, the biggest impact was he had a child die. So he was a gentleman. He wasn't like working for Planned Parenthood, but he was just a regular OBGYN. It was just part of his practice to do, uh, abortions. And but he said that what got to him more was people like caring about him rather than like shouting at him or arguing with him in a kind of a petulant manner. So I think that there's the kindness that I think is important that we extend. And I remember when Matthew asked me to be the faculty advisor and I was asking him about what this group does, and he talked about the poll, and he said, we're not argumentative, we're caring. And I think that goes a long way. And I think that that's an important thing that you brought up. And I think we have to care about the individual presenting facts, yes, but not just being really great apologists, not good argumenters. We can be great arguers, but I don't think that will often win our argument if we're caring about the other person and we're listening as well. I think it's a good thing. And so I like what you had to say about that.
Yeah, I remember like two-ish years ago when our club first got started, we had a speaker come by. I forget what her name was, but then like there's like a pro-choice club on campus, and they came, and they did their little walkout thing, just to kind of get attention. It may have been Astrid, yeah, Rocio, but I'm not certain. Well, anyway, so after the talk, we all kind of went outside, and you can kind of tell who they were. They're all kind of grouped together, and I came up to them, and I was like, "So hey, like, what do you guys think?" And they're like, "Oh, well, we disagree and all this and that." I was like, "Okay, cool." And I asked them, I was like, "What was there anything that was said that like just kind of like turned you off and you stopped listening? Like what's like the biggest turnoff for you?" Right? Like, and I had to like emphasize, like, I want to like communicate with you, and I want to make sure, like, what is it that's like triggering you or what's just like a non-negotiable for you. And she was like very surprised, like her demeanor changed. She's like, oh, well, if you stopped the comparisons to like slavery, like that would like really help. It's like, okay. And I have my own views on that. So, and it was like very, yeah, all of them just like changed. And we shook hands afterwards. We're like, all right, cool. So we had, you know, they felt heard, and that had them, you know, so they came in with like I can tell like a spirit of just like defensiveness, but no, just saying like, hey, like what can we do better to like reach out to you. They really enjoyed that. They really appreciated that, and I haven't heard from them since. So yeah, okay. There's a long comment. Yeah, on time point approaches. So we can stand solidarity with preborn children. Southern border. Yeah. How can we, as members of a generation that believes all lives are intrinsically valuable, defend our stance without coming across as hypocritical? Good question. From Hector. So, one worry is that being pro-life can be so mixed up with other issues that it almost becomes meaningless, right? So sometimes you'll see like people say like, oh, well, if you're really pro-life, you'll like vote for socialism because that'll take care of families and stuff like that. Or if you really cared about, you know, or if you were really pro-life, you would vote for this other issue, right? So just whatever, you know, whatever X is. And it's the sort of tangential issue. So don't get like, I would just say don't get too wrapped up in that, because pro-life has a certain meaning. It doesn't mean we're for this policy or that policy, because you know with these other policies you can have reasonable debate, and or like you can have differences among pro-lifers, right? So take for example, like should pro-lifers be voting for something like welfare? Pro-lifers can disagree about that and still be pro-life. Don't get sucked into this belief that if you aren't on one side of this other side issue, you aren't really pro-life. Don't let them try to redefine pro-life like that. That's really dangerous if you do that. So specifically about the separation of children at the southern border, it's okay to take a position on that. If you're against that, I mean, I don't know what the details are, but if you're against that, just be like, yeah, okay, I'm against that. Like, okay, so then I'm not a hypocrite. Okay, and if I'm not a hypocrite, like, are you like pro-life now? No? Oh, okay. So it doesn't have to do anything with my character, whether I'm a hypocrite or not. Because it isn't about who we are, you know. So if they want to, you know, just kind of refocus on them. Like, okay, like if you want to be pro-life and you want to take a side on this other issue, go for it. We would, you know, we have a pretty big tent. We're not too exclusive on things like that. So recognize that for like the distraction that it is. If they bring up capital punishment, yeah. So pro-lifers are also divided on the issue of capital punishment. That one strikes a little closer to heart because it is dealing with a life and death issue. I personally think that you can be pro-capital punishment and pro-life because, you know, if we go back to the slide, you know, the key premise of that is an innocent life, and I don't think people who are on death row are innocent. So there's no inconsistency on our part. You can be against the death penalty. I'm okay with that. I don't mind. So yeah. So like I said, our tent's pretty big. We can have a diversity of opinions on other things. But the unborn and also end of life issues like euthanasia are those are our defining issues. That is what defines what being pro-life is about. So don't get too distracted. But think about it. Definitely think about it. And I have articles if you want me to send you articles. So let's see.
Okay.
Yeah, what's up?
Yeah. So what exactly
Is what?
What exactly is abortion?
Abortion, so elective abortion at least, is the intentional like expulsion of the fetus from the womb.
Okay, so does it like a pharmaceutical drugs, or is it like a surgical procedure?
It can be both. There are different methods. Yeah. I know the pills that you can take are called like abortifacients. So what they do is they expel the product of conception, the baby, the fetus, from like implanting in your womb, and it will come out. So that's one. So it can be done chemically like that, or it can be done, especially when it's bigger. You do need an operation. So, and we've seen the pictures, right, of the chopped up body parts. So yeah. So pills that can do that are called abortifacients, and it got abort in the term. So yeah, that would count as an abortion as well.
Okay. So yeah, another thing that I see come up is, do we allow abortion? To me, the issue with me is that should we ban an outright ban on abortion, or should we have it as a regulated thing? And what is the view of pro-lifers, or whether it should be regulated or outright banned?
I think the most consistent view is that it should just be outright banned, right? So think back to our argument, our two premise and a conclusion argument. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. It is wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being. So it is, abortion's wrong. We can kind of expand that. It should be illegal, completely illegal to kill an innocent human being. Abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being, so abortion should be illegal.
Adrian, how would you respond to the claim that if, for example, if someone needed my kidney to survive, I wouldn't be forced to donate it to them? Likewise, if the fetus or the unborn baby needs my uterus, I don't have to let them have my uterus. So therefore, abortion is okay. How would you respond to that?
So the first thing we have to point out is that this assumes a view called volunteerism, right? So it's the view that something only has obligatory force if you voluntarily accept it, right? So in the case of like your kidney thing, because you didn't volunteer to give someone your kidney, that therefore it has no, obligatory force on you. And so likewise, if you didn't volunteer to have a child, you should not be obliged to continue to care for that child. So that's a view called volunteerism. But volunteerism seems to be false. So for example, so take this case, right? So let's say there's a couple and they have sex, but they take like every precaution to not conceive, right? So they take contraceptives, so maybe, so the woman takes like her pills and the guy wears a condom and something like that. But then let's say, despite all that, they get pregnant, and or she gets pregnant, and she decides to keep the baby because why not? And then she goes to the father and says, "Hey, I have a baby. We have a baby. Question: should the father be in that child's life, even if just monetarily, even if just financially? Well, he didn't volunteer for that, right? He didn't volunteer to be that child's father or to be a father at all. He took every precaution against it. But we don't, we would, I think most people would say, and even the law recognizes, that the father has an obligation to that child, not because he volunteered or did not volunteer, but in virtue of just being, in virtue of having this relationship to the child, the relationship being a father. Or another way you can kind of look at it is, it assumes volunteerism, but volunteerism it destroys every obligation in your family whatsoever. So like, do you have an obligation to your brother or your sister? You didn't volunteer to be their brother or their sister. You didn't volunteer to have this mother or that father, but you still have an obligation to them. And not because you had like this social contract, written up that you signed, and you're like, yes, I agree to be this person's brother or this person's child. But no, you have an obligation in virtue of that relationship. So imagine okay, so I don't know, yeah, so it would break down just like whole entire families, and that seems kind of counterintuitive. Well, now some philosophers, some people would be like, yeah, down with the family, then okay, that's a bigger issue. But I would say, for the most part, we do have obligations, not in virtue of volunteering for them, but in virtue of having relations with them, having a specific relation to them. Another thing is that, and I kind of brought this up with the parasite example, is that the unborn seem to have a natural place in the body. Someone else does not have a natural right to your kidney, but it does seem like babies have a natural right to a womb. So like natural attach. So someone who takes your kidney they don't do it naturally, but a baby in a womb is natural, right? That's the period of that's where the period of natural development begins, is in the womb. And so the baby naturally belongs in the womb, and so has a right to it, right? The newborn also, yeah. So I would say that. Also, so let's say like you went through with that, right? And say, okay, this person does not deserve my kidney. And then that person without that kidney dies, right? So there's a difference here between killing and letting die, right? So what's the difference? Well, if someone is like dying, like, so if someone needs your kidney, it's because there's something wrong with them. They're in a state of decline. They are dying, in short, just to kind of make it simpler. They're dying. And so if you don't give them your kidney, you're letting them die. You're letting the natural process kind of like work its way out, right? But that's not what's happening in abortion. Abortion really is the active killing. It's not like, oh, okay, like this baby is dying and it needs you to survive. Like, no, it is there and it is healthy and it is growing, and that's the natural history of its development, right? So it isn't dying, it is growing, it is living. So when you have an abortion, when you detach it from yourself, it isn't the same thing as like detaching a kidney from someone else, right? So okay, so think of it like this, right? So like, if you have a newborn and you don't feed it and it dies, you are actively killing it, right? Because it's perfectly healthy, but it does need these things to continue to survive. It's not like it's dying and it needs food, or else it, to stave off death. That's just part of its natural history of growth. So when you have an abortion, you say like, okay, you're not going to have my blood, you're not going to have my oxygen, you're not going to have any of this. then yeah, you are actively killing it, just like you would be refusing to feed your newborn. And notice too that this doesn't just apply to the unborn. This does apply to newborns as well. This kind of going back to the, it justifies infanticide, because when you say this person needs my kidney to survive, the need to survive, the need to grow doesn't just stop when you're born. Like I said earlier, you don't see, babies, you don't see 2-year-olds walking around factory floors getting a paycheck so they can pay for their shelter and their food and whatever. No, they're still very much dependent on their parents. So okay, so we can like try out the toddler here. Like, okay, so let's say, we have a 2-year-old who needs my kidney or something like that. Like, is it okay to kill him? Is it okay to like slit its throat just because it needs it? Like, no, it does not. It does not justify that. So then why would it justify it if it's unborn? So yeah, that was a lot, but that's what I would say. It's a very popular kind of analogy. That's why there is a lot to say, but that's what I would say. Daniela, by that logic, when a pro-choicer who acknowledges the humanity of unborn have to allow cannibalism. It doesn't make sense, but I feel like it's using his similar logic. I don't know. I'm not following the cannibalism point. Can you explain that a bit more?
Her question was, how would you respond to a pro-choicer who says that pro-lifers have to be vegan? Like, if they're against killing the unborn child because it's alive, then how would you justify killing animals? And the point you want to make is that humans, have more valuable. Someone who really believes that humans and animals have the same value, that humans aren't more valuable, would have to commit themselves to cannibalism.
Right.
For example, like eating a newborn would be like just as bad as eating a dog if they're both equally intelligent.
Or a chicken, right? Because I don't know a lot of people who eat dogs. So yeah, so remember there's two parts to the premise, is that, or when we make our case, there's two parts. Number one, that it's alive. Yes, that's part one. But part two, it's a human being. Lots of things are alive, but not lots of things are human beings. So it distinctly has two parts to it for that reason. So plants are alive, dogs are alive, chickens are alive, but being alive doesn't merely give you human value. Being an alive human gives you human value. So that's what I would say. Now, what is the difference between a human being and a dog or a cat? I recently published a paper on this. It got accepted. It was published on the ethics of trophy hunting. And what I argue there is that the reason why human beings have a moral status and mere animals don't is that human beings have the power of rationality. That is, we have the power to look out into the world and see, number one, recognize that there are obligations. Those obligations belong to us, and that we have to act towards them, right? So we see, like, okay, there is a good out there. This is going to get philosophical. I'm sorry. I'm a nerd, but like I said, I did recently just get published on this. So so we see a good out there, and then we use our rationality to grasp the good and then to figure out a way to that good. It seems like mere animals don't have that. That's why they don't have things like language. They don't have things like culture, art, civilization, and we do. And so because our rationality understands the good and is able to give us the power to be good, that is what makes us moral creatures. So things like chickens, dogs, cats, animals like that do not have moral status. So they are alive, yes, but they are not moral creatures because they do not have the power of rationality. So, and because human beings are by nature rational animals, that's our definition, rational animals, at least going back to Aristotle. An unborn has the power of rationality, but just doesn't function. No, it doesn't exercise that function. So we are moral creatures in virtue of having the power, not in virtue of exercising that power. The pro-choicers with the functionalists view, they'll say, well, no, you have to exercise that power first. But for us, like, no, you just have to have it, even if you don't exercise it right away. Because, you know, like I said earlier, like, we don't exercise that power when we're sleeping, or we're knocked out, when we're in surgery, stuff like that. Can I send the link for my paper? Yeah, I can send you the link to my paper. Let's see. Okay, I'm gonna have to look away from the screen for a sec. Okay, so let me know if that works. And I'm going to be the second entry in that journal. Yeah. So you don't have to be, okay, so really quick, you don't have to be vegan to be pro-life. Some people are vegan. They think it is consistent. What's her name? Teresa Bukowski, I think is her name. She's part of Secular Pro-Life. She's based up in San Francisco. She's vegan because she thinks that's part of what it takes to be pro-life. Now, I don't think you have to be, because I think there's a difference between human beings and there's a difference between rational animals and mere animals, but that's me. But I mean, that's been the dominant view anyways. Like I said, from Aristotle, even before Aristotle, people were not vegan back. Well, some people were vegan, but for religious reasons, for penitential reasons, not for any ethical reason. But yeah, people, I mean, actually, what is the history of veganism? When did that first come about? That's weird. I want to say it's a recent phenomenon, because you don't hear of any like vegans in like ancient Greece or in the medieval era, because they thought, you know, these poor chickens need to go to heaven or something. And I can give you other papers on the moral status of animals. Peter Singer, who I brought up. Okay, so this is really funny, really ironic. Peter Singer, who I brought up earlier, who was like this pro-abortion and pro-like infanticide philosopher, is also a vegan. He has this book called Animal Liberation, which is like the Bible of like vegans. That might be a bit of an extreme and uncharitable thing to say, but whatever. I recognize that. Yeah, he's got this whole book on like why we should treat animals a certain way, and it's because he thinks they have self-awareness. Certain pigs have a certain level of self-awareness, so you cannot kill a pig, but you can kill an unborn. And that's the, yeah. Do pro-choice vegans also care about unborn animals? I guess it just depends on the kind of vegan you are. Like I said, with Peter Singer, probably not, because they lack self-awareness. These unborn animals also lack self-awareness. But there's a funny story. So here, I actually have it here. So if you guys are able to get this book, it's called Tactics by Gregory Kokel. He has a really funny story in here about when he's talking to a Wiccan, like a witch. And he sees like her pendant, and he's like, oh, like, what do you mean by, does that have like any moral or religious significance for you? She's like, oh yeah, I'm a witch. And it's like, oh, what do witches believe? And she's like, oh, all life is precious. And she's like, and so Greg Kokel is like, okay, if all life is precious, are you pro-life? And she's like, no. And so it's really funny how he kind of like presses that. So get the book, it's really good. It's not specifically about abortion, it's just about like how to have a conversation. So, and it's a Christian book, but it's just a Socratic method. All it is, really. It's a good book. I have, actually, if you want, if any of you is interested, I have 4 copies. If you want one, let me know. Send me your address. Because I used to have a study group for that. And so I would just loan out the books. But because of COVID, no one wants to gather anymore. So, so to answer the question, what is the book about again? It's about how to have a conversation about your Christian convictions. You don't have to be a Christian to appreciate, because like I said, it's really about how to talk with people. So it's kind of like a communications book. It's really, really good. It's really good. Be a Christian anyways, though. That's not part of Students for Life. That's my own personal opinion.
I've read the book too. I can say
Yeah.
say it's really good.
Yeah.
The arguments that are presented in there.
Did you see that there's a new edition out?
The updated, expanded edition. That's
Yeah.
like mini tactics. That's the one I actually have.
Oh, really? Okay. Yeah. So the reason I have no like qualms of giving this away is because I want to get the new edition.
Oh, right. Okay. Yeah, I got
This is the older
version.
Yeah, I hear it's like twice as big. So like, just kind of, is it thicker than this?
No, I think it just has. Let me bring it out. I believe the difference. I don't know. Here's the thickness.
Ooh.
It's probably,
yeah. Okay. Yours is thicker.
It might be a little thicker, but I think.
Okay. How many pages do you have?
Mine has, well, not including the notes section, 267.
Okay, so mine has 200 flat.
Oh, 200 flat. Okay, so maybe he did.
Yeah, let's say that's a significant amount to add.
Interesting. Yeah, I think he added like the mini tactics, and like the last chapter is like the more sweat, less blood chapter.
Yeah. Well, I have that chapter in here. More sweat, less blood.
Oh, you have that chapter? Okay.
Yeah.
Tactics in there? Maybe he.
Yeah, I don't have the mini tactics in here now. No.
Okay. There's the inside out claim.
Ooh.
Okay, so that's a new one.
Here. Yeah, so there's taking off the roof, sibling rivalry, steamroller, road scholar, just a facts.
Yep. Okay, so he added in
suicide
tactics. He has the views that self-destruct, right? The self-defeat.
Yeah. That's under suicide. Yeah.
The sibling rivalry and infanticide, and then interesting. Okay, so.
Daniela wants a copy, and Hector. Okay, so just okay, Hector, are you? Do I know you as Amard? Are you Amard? No. Okay. All right. So let's see. How can you send me your ad? Because I don't want you to like post it up here because I think this is still being recorded. Send me. Actually, no. You can. Yeah. Private message me. Yeah. Okay. So send me your address in a private message now, and I'll get that mailed out to you.
Oh yeah, maybe how would you respond to somebody? I don't know if you get into a conversation, someone says, "Well, I just don't really care about this issue."
Ooh, yeah, apathy, dude. That's a hard one. Hold on, let me just finish writing down these addresses real quick.
Okay, yeah.
All right, so apathy. So I would say, okay, sorry. When I was first looking into the pro-life issue, I was a bit unsure of how to proceed, right? Because I had become a Christian, and I was like, okay, like my moral sense was, I was getting woke. I was waking up, and I was like, a lot of my Christian friends are like pro-life. Like, oh, that's like I didn't really care about that when I was, not a Christian. And so I was like, should I care about it too? And I was looking into it. I was just like, oh wait, like this is a big deal. But then like if it's such a big deal, how come this isn't being like screamed from like the rooftops? Like like what's with the silence? And I went out. I went camping with a friend. I wasn't really camping. My friend has a cabin up in the woods, and he showed me this video by Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Well, not by, but it's about his life. Dietrich Bonhoeffer. Or Bryce? Do you know who Dietrich? Yeah, okay. And I've never heard of him before, and it's a biography of his life. And there's a moment when he's in jail. Context for those who don't know, Dietrich Bonhoeffer was this. I think he was a Lutheran pastor. He was part of like the Valkyrie attempt on Hitler's life. So he tried to, he was very against the Nazis, and he. 3, 45, 4. Okay, I'll try to make this quick. So he's in jail for opposing Hitler, basically, and his sister writes him a letter in jail and is like, "Hey, why? We love you, we miss you, we don't want you to die. Why?" And he writes this letter in response and says, like, look, if there is a madman driving his truck down a market, and I have the power to like take the steering wheel from him, I have to do that, because if I don't, I'm going to be judged by God. And that struck me. I was like, oh, I'm in that situation now. I'm going to be judged. So, okay, if the person is, especially if the person is Christian and they're apathetic, like, look, God's not going to, this is going to be on your soul that you did nothing. Now, if you're not a Christian, this is where images of the Holocaust and images of slavery come in. This is the reason why we do this. It's to wake people up. Yes, it upsets people, but why does it upset you? It upsets you because it's a moral wrong. You recognize something is morally wrong, and it's trying to wake you up. It's trying to wake up this moral sense, and you get angry because you don't want to be woken up. So if they are apathetic, ask them, like, can I show you a picture, like a graphic picture? Right. So ask for their permission first. And if they say yes, like, here, look at this. This is what's happening to millions of children every day. No, okay, thousands of children every day.
Millions of children.
A year, almost. Yeah, there we go. Yeah. Want to get my numbers right, or at least approximately right.
Yeah.
And say, like, this is happening. Like, wouldn't you think, if you were like a white person in antebellum South in America, don't you think you would say something about slavery? If you were a German in Nazi Germany, wouldn't you want to say something? Don't you look back now and think, wow, those people were cowards. Those people were scared and they did nothing, and they allowed this great evil to happen. The same thing's happening now, right? You have millions of innocent people, of innocent children, systematically slaughtered. And, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. If that's what you're worried about, being on the right side of history, you're going to be on the wrong side of history. If you're a Christian, you're on the wrong side of heaven.
Yeah.
So,
really good point.
Yeah. And if still they don't care, okay, if you don't care, fine, just vote this way. At least vote.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a really good point. And yeah, definitely bringing up a picture of something like that would definitely probably invoke some sort of disgustingness, I guess you could say, to the issue. And it should make people feel disgusting, as pictures of the Holocaust make people feel disgusting, as pictures of slavery make people feel disgusting. In the same way, it should make people have kind of a gross reaction towards this kind of stuff. And I think your point was great. I mean, if we can say that we can say that killing, you know, I don't know, 6 million Jews in the Holocaust was wrong, or Stalin killing 20 million of his own henchmen, right, in communist Russia, or Mao, or Pol Pot, or you look at all of these other tragedies as well. I think even in those cases, I believe there has still been more abortions performed since 1973 than even in those cases, such as the 20 million that were killed in communist Russia and 35 million in communist China.
Yeah.
You know, so I think it's the numbers like 57 million something for total number of abortions. So yeah, this is I would say, so anybody that wouldn't say that this is genocide, I would just say what, Rocio, you posted something. Someone on Twitter argued that abortion is not a genocide. Yeah, I would just totally disagree when really looking at how many abortions have been performed every year and ever since 1973. It's something like 50 million or something. 56 million. Yeah. Every year, really. I thought that was total. Every year, yeah, that's a lot. I thought that was total, but if it's 56 million every year, that's a lot of babies being murdered unjustly.
Yeah, it's about 60 million every year worldwide. But if you're talking about just the United States, there's been about 60 million abortions since Roe v. Wade got passed, which was in 1973. Okay. So you might be conflating.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
Thanks for clarifying.
That's what was going on. Yeah. All right. Well, we're kind of winding down here. So, such a bummer of a note. Oh my gosh, let's not end here.
All right. Anyway.
So Amy Barrett.
Oh, okay.
How do you guys feel about her?
So it looks like CNN said that she's going to be the nominee, but it's CNN. So, but yeah, I feel like
I don't know if her vote, I mean, just because there's another Supreme Court, you know, she's Catholic too. So I don't know if necessarily one is going to sway the vote to really to repeal Roe v. Wade. But I mean, it's a good step in the right direction.
Yeah, it is definitely a step, and we need that step. Yeah.
Oh yes, yeah, and I actually hope she gets on.
Yep.
That's my opinion. But,
she is definitely a danger to Roe.
Yes.
So, all right. So hopefully that happens. I think we should end on that note.